All right, I want you to picture this. A totally peaceful, familiar scene. A beloved family cat living her life on a quiet, tucked-away cul-de-sac right near a Christmas tree farm. For her owner, who actually grew up in a rural area where letting cats roam outside was just the accepted, everyday norm, there was absolutely nothing unusual about this. The cat stayed close to home, usually just hanging around the backyard, and she always came when she was called. It was this picturesque, idyllic life that felt entirely safe.
And then, the illusion of that quiet neighborhood just completely shatters. A neighbor's teenage son shot her with a BB gun, and despite making it to the vet, she died in surgery. I'm sharing this heartbreaking detail not to shock you, but because this specific, devastating event became the exact catalyst for a massive, fiercely contested discussion that completely reframed how we think about our pets.
Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving headfirst into the incredibly intense debate surrounding roaming cats. We are moving far, far past the simple indoor versus outdoor binary that usually dominates comment sections. Instead, we're looking at the moral friction, the unspoken rules of neighborhoods, and the heavy price tag of an animal's independence.
Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to map this multifaceted debate out in 5 clear steps. The cul-de-sac tragedy, the human cruelty factor, crossing property lines, the indoor enrichment debate, and finally, the true cost of freedom.
Starting with Section 1, the cul-de-sac tragedy, and the spark that ignited this whole debate.
So, when the owner shared their grief online asking people to stop normalizing free-roaming cats, well, it completely destroyed a common defense. Why? Because this tragedy happened right at home, not on some busy city highway. And almost immediately, people split into 2 deeply polarized factions. On one side, you have the normalized free-roaming camp. They point out that cats are naturally curious creatures that sometimes roam for miles. They argue that in many parts of the world, like the UK, outdoor access is totally culturally normal, and sometimes even expected by animal rescues. But on the flip side, you have the strictly indoor camp. They point to the harsh realities of the outdoors: cars, poison, disease, devastating damage to local wildlife, and of course, cruel people. It's basically a massive clash between a romanticized view of a cat's natural exploration and a hyper-vigilant focus on modern dangers.
Moving to Section 2, the human cruelty factor, the truly unpredictable variable here.
Now, what's really interesting and honestly terrifying about this debate is that the most frightening stories that surfaced weren't about cars or natural predators. They were about people. It completely reframes our entire concept of outdoor dangers. Just look at these personal accounts. One cat survived a pellet gun but actually lost a leg. Over in South London, a commenter recalled cats returning home with severe, deliberate burns. Another person described neighbors repeatedly letting aggressive dogs loose specifically to target smaller animals. So the threat here isn't just a distracted driver or a predator acting on wild instinct, it is unpredictable, deliberate human cruelty.
So the crucial point we need to take away is this entirely new definition of the property line. In this debate, a property line is not just a legal boundary drawn on a city grid. It is the exact physical point where an owner gives up total control. Think about it. As one person pointed out, a cat doesn't actually need to make a catastrophic mistake or wander into traffic. They only need to cross the boundary of one single person who happens to hate cats.
Which brings us to Section 3, crossing the property line, specifically looking at the dog owner's perspective.
Because you see, this debate wasn't just limited to cat owners. Dog owners emphatically joined the fight, and their perspective was visceral, frustrated, and deeply angry. Take this one childhood conflict a commenter remembered. Their family huskies mauled a neighbor's cat. But wait, here is the absolutely critical context for this. The dog owners had a private yard, and it was secured behind a fence more than 6 feet high. They had explicitly warned the neighbors. And yet, when the roaming cat repeatedly breached that barrier and the absolute worst happened, the cat's family tried to involve the police and demanded the dogs be put down. This exposes an incredibly uncomfortable reality. A roaming cat doesn't just wander through some abstract wilderness. It actively enters other people's private property.
There is massive friction between these two groups. On one hand, you have dog owners who are doing everything right. They manage their dogs, use leashes in public, and build expensive 6-foot fences precisely to contain their animals and keep the neighborhood safe. But then, you have a free-roaming cat with completely unrestricted access that drops right into that private enclosure where a dog with a strong prey drive lives. The middle ground here? It's ugly but realistic. Absolutely nobody is celebrating a dead cat. But dog owners are fiercely contesting the expectation that they should be held responsible when someone else's pet invades their secured private space.
All right, Section 4, the indoor enrichment debate, and the limits of a closed door.
The strict anti-roaming side often just says, hey, keep the cat inside, problem solved, right? Well, there was a massive wave of pushback arguing that indoor life can super easily become just a convenient excuse for human laziness. And this might be one of the most vital takeaways from this whole thing. A closed door is merely a boundary. It is absolutely not enrichment. Simply confining an animal to a small, empty home with zero stimulation is not automatically giving them a good life. Even the strongest indoor advocates admit this. If you are going to take away a cat's ability to explore, hunt, and move outside, you absolutely have to replace those behaviors inside. We heard stories of indoor cats who escaped and were found hours later just completely terrified on the back deck, proving that, not every cat secretly dreams of the wild. But even those homebodies, they need serious playtime and engagement.
And this brilliantly illustrates the realistic middle ground. Because if a closed door isn't enough and free roaming is way too dangerous, solutions like catios, harness walks, supervised yards, and fully enclosed outdoor spaces step in to bridge that gap. These options allow the cat to feel the sun, smell the air, and get that novelty of the outdoors, but without giving them unrestricted access to busy roads, hostile wildlife, or a neighbor's husky. It keeps a human attached to the equation.
Which leads us to our final section, Part 5, the true cost of freedom. Who actually absorbs the risk?
Part of confronting the true cost of freedom means really looking at the wildlife argument and the ultimate moral responsibility of the pet owner. Look at it this way. When roaming cats hunt and kill native birds, owners often shrug it off, saying the cat is just being a cat. But when a dog kills a roaming cat that enters its yard, those exact same owners often scream aggression and demand the dog be euthanized. Opponents of roaming are quick to highlight this massive moral contradiction. It shows how society treats cats completely differently from other animals, largely just because of our own emotional closeness to them. But to a nesting bird, your beloved companion is literally nothing but a deadly predator.
Let's move to and see how this builds into arguably the most sobering question of the whole debate. When an owner relies on the logic of, well, he always comes back, who actually absorbs the consequences when that luck inevitably runs out? Think about it. The cat pays with its life. The bird is hunted right in its own nest. The neighbor has their private yard invaded. The driver carries the trauma of hitting an animal. And the owner is left with irreversible grief, knowing a decision once considered totally normal ended in tragedy.
Ultimately, we have to contrast our highly romanticized idea of freedom against the stark, harsh reality of exposure. See, freedom implies a clean, moral sense of unrestricted exploration. But in modern neighborhoods, free roaming is actually just exposure. It is the literal act of removing the human protector at the exact moment the risk begins. The owner of the cat from the cul-de-sac learned this in the most painful way possible. Their cat always came back, right up until the day she didn't.
And that leaves us with one final, deeply provocative thought to close out this explainer. A cat doesn't understand property lines. It doesn't know which dog lives behind which fence, or whether the teenager across the street sees a cute pet or a target. The human knows those risks exist, and the human knows they cannot control them once that cat is out of sight. So we really have to ask ourselves, is freedom still freedom when the animal has absolutely no idea what it is being asked to survive? Thank you so much for exploring this with me today. It's a heavy topic for sure, but an absolutely crucial one for anyone who loves their pets.